Welcome back. Today I'm going to go over how I set up my Freewing 90mm F-15 Eagle. This one's a little bit more interesting to set up than the other ones are, especially like the F-16 that's sitting there, in that it doesn't have flaperons, it just has standard flaps. This one took an extensive amount of work to get the elevators to function as ailerons. Roughly 2 hours of work, actually. It was really annoying, but in retrospect it was worth every bit of effort. For reference, this plane usually flies on a 5200 6-cell Z-Pack. Again, I've mentioned in the past, I get these for like 120 bucks on Amazon for a 2-pack. It's a really good deal. The center of gravity is currently balancing about right here, so if I'm to pick it up, balances about perfectly right there, which enables me to do more advanced maneuvers like flat spins, forced high alpha, things of that nature. With the amount of deflection I have in these stabs, I can pretty much hold this plane in the air just with the stabs alone. There's no throttle management necessary aside from giving it a little bit of throttle. The center of gravity was achieved by getting some of the nose weight out, and by some I mean pretty much all. Thanks to one of the fellows on RC groups mentioned that there was a significant amount of weight sitting in this nose cone, which was counterbalancing it really bad. Here it is right here. This thing is 21 grams, almost a full ounce of weight, which was making the plane balance about right here. It was terrible. But I made all these modifications and everything that I've done and that you're going to see in this video before I even took it up to fly it, just because at this point I've pretty much gotten confident that it works, and it works almost every single time. And it seems to be platform agnostic. It doesn't seem to matter whether or not it's an F-15, an F-22, an F-16, even the Viper jet or the airliner. They're all set up very similarly. Believe it or not, even the airliner up here has a Taileron setup in some situations, just because I want more roll and I want to be able to have that roll if I want it. So I'm not going to go too much into how I set up the wiring, because the amount of effort it would take to get that on camera isn't really worth it. When you look inside of here, you'll kind of see why. It's very narrow and there's a bunch of wires running underneath this particular battery tray. This is an older Freewing model. It dates back to 2015, I believe. So they did update it though. It's running the newest 90mm in-runner, the 1900 kV, which is the one that the high performance F-22 ships with. I've heard in the past from many people that this plane is slow. You can check my maiden flight and you can check the 12-minute flight that I put up with it. Not 12 minutes, but 12-minute video of it flying multiple times. It is not slow. There's no drag issues. It lands perfectly. It flies really well. If anything, it's one of the better flying EDFs I've ever flown, and I've flown quite a few. This one's remarkable. It's really nice. One of the things I did with this is I installed an AR 10360T, the newest 10-channel receiver from Spektrum. This is the same one that I'm running in the airliner as well. That one I set up with spoilers and some other stuff that I'll talk about in another video. On this one, I wanted the ability to have each stab independent for Tailerons. And I also wanted the ability to have the nose wheel be trimmable. Before I even flew this plane, it required a significant amount of nose trim. And I'm very happy that I went through and made it trimmable on this right trimmer here. Because if I hadn't, it would have, it would have taken a lot of picking up and manually twisting and adjusting to get it just right. As of now, I've already got it mechanically centered, so it should be no problem. But all the flights that you saw in the last two videos were it being trimmed on the right trimmer, which worked really well. Got it through the day, and it let me get back home and do some maintenance to get rid of all the clay and whatnot that had built up in the wheels and the wheel wells. Additionally, I'm running a voltage cable so I can actually get voltage telemetry. Go ahead and turn the volume up so you can hear. Well, you don't even have to hear it, you can just see it. It should be right here. So currently my 6-cell pack is running at 23.09 volts, which is good. That's about storage voltage. It's great to have that info in the air. It's not perfect, but I prefer it to a timer. I know exactly where my battery's at. I know exactly when I need to get down, and I can estimate how many powered passes I have left before I need to bring the plane down. It seems to work really well, and I can't complain about it. I know some people are hardcore into timers. I just use it for a stopwatch. That's all I really care about. I just like to know how much usable flying time that I got. I don't want to use a timer to determine when I go down, because ultimately your flying style day to day may change. You may want to be slower some days and just do circles. For example, I did this a while ago with the F-22 when I still had it. I flew it in circles for like 9 minutes, just going really slowly, like 25 to 40% throttle in turns, and just kept it going in ovals to see how long I could keep it in the air. Could probably do it with this one, but it is a little heavier and the wings are narrower, and they're more loaded than the F-22 is, so it's not something I really want to try too much, but I'm sure it could be done. So let's get out of that and into the more interesting stuff. Actually, before I go, there's a secondary receiver that is wired through the belly and is sitting in the back next to the engine mount. So that helps to keep the frame losses completely down. Nothing to worry about there. I didn't even do a range check on this jet when I took it up, just with how confident I am that it was going to fly well. I've done so many receiver placement jobs and so many antenna placement jobs that I just know that the way that I placed it in there, having one pointing forward on the side, one pointing down in the front, one pointing to the across the jet in the back, and then another one pointing down. I've never had a single issue where, unless I was flying right next to a cell phone tower, that I had to worry about failsafe. So that being said, let's get into talking about rates. I currently fly this jet on 150% rates, as you can see on the monitor, except I'm in low rates because the gear are out. So let's pull them up and you can see. So 150% rates, up and down, left and right, and that even goes for the rudders as well, even though I don't use them as much, because unless I'm really trying to adjust for a crosswind landing, there's not much of a reason to use rudder in a jet. As many people have noticed on RC groups, rudder causes a snap roll in these fighter jets. The only one it doesn't do that with is my Viper, and I still have yet to figure out why. But it's pretty awesome to be able to hold a snap roll in a Viper jet, or not a snap roll, but a knife edge. So currently the ailerons are deflecting down about 50 millimeters and about 45 up. And the flaps are deflecting, the way I've got it set right now, to, let's see, on takeoff, that's sitting on the bar, there we go. Put it back up real quick. At takeoff, they are deflecting to about 25 millimeters, which is a little bit more than what the book calls for. And then at full deflection, they're deflecting to about 45 millimeters. That works pretty well. I do have a slight elevator compensation. You can barely even see the elevator moving, but they absolutely do. Just barely. Yeah, it's like a 3% mix. So it's there just to help keep the plane stay in high alpha, or at least keep the nose pointed up. I don't know how I'm going to go about getting the stabs measured. This plane isn't exactly designed to put a throw measurement on it, so let's just try this. Maybe you can stick it on the back of this thing. Okay, that's gonna have to work. I have to eyeball it. Having it mounted to the engine nozzle there, it's kind of funny. All right, let's see, move it forward a little bit. Okay, so I'm pretty sure this is gonna be off the chart. Yep, so deflecting to about 70 millimeters up. I'd take a guess on that one, and about 70 millimeters down. Again, it's just guessing. I don't have a deflection meter that can actually read both up and down. I suppose I could put my phone on there and just get a pitch reading. That would probably be a good idea. Let's try that. Go to GPS status and just place my phone on the stab and see what it says. Never actually tried doing this. Okay, so currently it's sitting at, okay, so it's facing down 2 degrees. So if I was to pull it up, it is pitching up 35 degrees, so roughly 37 because it was down -2, and then pitching down 38 degrees. So it's about roughly down 36 degrees and up 38 or so. So that's a pretty good amount of deflection for my quick little test there, holding my phone against it. From the behind, I'm using actual, like, the full rates for it. I don't use any kind of compensation. It's just 100%. So the elevators move completely with the ailerons and all aspects of the flight. This is one of the other things, again, as I mentioned in the past, that allows for maneuvers like flat spins. All I have to do is get it like this. When the plane starts stalling, it'll start spinning. Uniquely, compared to other jets that I've spun, this one actually accelerates the spin as it goes down further. I took it up to about 400 feet the other day and had it come straight down in the flat spin, and the thing actually started spinning faster as it went further down. I've never seen a jet do that. I've spun the F-16, I've spun the Viper jet inverted, and I've spun the F-22, and the F-22 was the most graceful one, but this one was the craziest one. It was actually really cool. Let's get the gear back out. So if you've seen my other setup videos, you'll know that when I'm dropping the gear, the rates also drop as well to simulate how a real jet will not allow you to over control it when you're coming into land or takeoff. Also, because of this jet has, you know, huge stabs that can go really far, it's prudent to have a low rate for landing and takeoff so you don't rip the stabs off when you come into land in high alpha. This was a problem I had with the F-22, because the F-22, I swear, could move 50 degrees up and down the way I had it set up. And more than once, I had actually ripped the stab, like the front part of the stab, the pointy part, completely off and had to go and re-glue it on, and it just looked miserable and awful. And that was before I decided to start using this low rate tied to gear function. Now this actually is set up with Expo as well. When gear up, Expo is 85%. When gear is down, Expo is 50%. So the low rates are 47%, but because I fly at 150% rates, 47% of 150 is 70%. So that's my low rate. And because I'm using a Taileron mix in all aspects of the flight, when I go to add roll with full pitch, the elevator actually moves more than 70%. It moves to about 140. So it almost moves completely up and down when you add roll to it. But that's about all it'll do. We can measure the rudder deflection too, but I don't really know if that matters much, considering I don't use it much. I have seen people who recommend with these jets to have like multiple rate switches. Again, I'm going to caution against flying a jet like this, where you gimp your rates. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to have multiple switches to constantly fumble around when you need that rate and then not have it. So currently getting about 38 millimeters to the right and about 38 millimeters to the left with the rudder in high rates, or sorry, low rates. But there is no rate switch on the elevator. Now that I recall what I'm talking about here, the rudder stays independent, and I just use 85% Expo on high and low tank. There's just basically no difference. It's just 150%. But I have so much Expo that when I move my finger halfway through the stick, the rudder barely moves. That goes for the nose wheel too. Again, I've seen people talking about setups with this particular jet, and then they go and they're like, well, you know, I set my nose wheel so that it only moves a little bit. Again, if you need that deflection, you won't have it. If you can only move this much and you're at the end of your stick and you get to an obstacle on the runway that you need to get around, you're not going to do it. The plane's going to run into it and you're going to be screwed. And the easy solution around this is just Expo. Just add Expo. It softens the stick. That's what it does. It's the easiest way to fly these jets in pretty much any model. Even, I mean, top tier 3D pilots will tell you the same thing I'm telling you. A plane is easier to control with bigger control surfaces like these stabs and ailerons when you have enough Expo to soften up the feel, so that you have the deflection when you need it. But if you just need to move your hand a little bit, it makes the jet look smooth and precise, like somebody's actually in it flying, rather than janky and weird because you moved your hand a little bit and the thing's moving all over the place. Let's get the gear back up. Again, you fly how you want, but this has worked for me. I've been, must have flown 700 times in the past, 700 to 800 times since March. And the last time I crashed was March, and that was because I got dared to take off of a road with a tree canopy above me. And I'm like, I bet I can get up without hitting the trees. And of course I hit the trees because I was being stupid in a jet that basically launches itself into the air because it's so lightweight. It's the 70mm Viper jet. Learned my lesson with that. I could probably do it now in one of these bigger jets because they don't just launch right into the air. They actually take a moment or two to gain lift and then lift up. But the Viper would just literally launch 20 feet when you pulled the stick back. It was stupid. I could probably do it too if I had followed some of the tips that I'm using now and added more Expo to the jet so that it would be more controllable at lower speeds and, you know, had lower rates and whatnot for with the gear out. But, you know, lessons learned. So yeah, the main takeaway from this is that this jet is capable of a lot of advanced maneuvering. I'm pretty sure you could get this thing to do a J-turn as well. If you're unfamiliar with a J-turn, if you saw me talking about adverse yaw in the F-16 and the reason why I keep the flaperons stuck when they're down and they don't move and only the Tailerons move when the flaps are out, it's to avoid adverse yaw, right? The interesting thing about adverse yaw is it can be used to good effect when you want it to be used that way. So say you have this plane in high alpha like this, and you're stalling. If you were to pull full left on the stick and pull back at the same time while you're at the verge of stall, what will happen if your CG's in the right spot, where it's about where mine is, and probably even further back if you want to do some more of this advanced stuff easily, you pull full back or full left, right or left, it doesn't really matter, and the adverse yaw caused by the drag of this elevator is going to pull the nose to the right. So you want to go, if you pull full back left, as you're like this, the plane is going to turn this way, and it's going to flip over itself and perform a J-turn. It'll look really cool. I've done it with the F-22. I wish I had had my cameraman filming it because it looks phenomenal in the air. It's not as good as the real J-turn, but you know, how much of the aerobatics that we do in RC is as good as the real jets? Some of it, not all of it. Similarly, if you pull to the right, that one will actually swing the nose to the left and cause it to do a J-turn in that particular direction. So some of the stuff you can think about doing for advanced aerobatic maneuvers. I will try to demonstrate them next time I take this jet up. I just have to remember to do it. I just get kind of caught up in the fun of doing touch and goes and landing and takeoff that sometimes I forget that I'm out there to test some stuff. So, one of the things that I did set up recently, and that I used before I even flew, or set up before I even flew the maiden, was the high G flat mix, which I don't feel confident so much using it on the F-16, just because it doesn't have separate ailerons. But on the F-15, as the elevators are pulled, I have a curve mix that gently pulls the flaps out to match the elevators, so that it creates additional lift as you're in a turn, and it helps the butt of the jet slide around more. It knows to have it set up so that they go upward as well. And to get this, I had to take both servos for the flaps out and then recenter them so that they were pointed just off center toward the back of the jet by about 10 degrees, the first notch that the servo arm would fit in. And that allows me to have enough space in the rotation for the flaps to go back up. Do they really do this on the jet? No, I don't think that they do. Do I care? No, it's a model. I want it to do stuff that I think looks cool. So if I want to have it coming in and doing essentially like an inverted high alpha, this would make it easier. Do I want to try that? Low above the deck? Probably not. But if I ever got confident enough with it and found out that it held an alpha pretty well upside down, I might try it. Unfortunately, these scale jets don't seem to perform as well upside down as they do vertically. I've tried up like inverted flat spins on my F-22, could not figure out how to get it to do it. The same stick movement that I use on to get it into it does not work upside down. It just kind of spins and goes to the ground, almost like it needs the CG further back, but I wasn't really tempted to add even more weight to a kind of a heavy plane as it is to test that out. For another aerobatic move that you can try, I also have a mix for what I call power loop. This is something that F-22s do, and it's a bit of mixing that I brought over from my F-22. And as you pull the elevators back, the flaps have no effect until right here, and they dump completely out to make the plane flip over itself almost instantly. So Horizon calls it snap flaps in like the Timber manual for the Timber 110. I just call it power loop flaps because I can go straight up, and then I have elevator that works normal throughout the entire stick until the very end. And that kind of makes for some interesting air show moves that you might not even consider doing with this jet, but would allow the plane to kind of go over and slide around the curves with whatever energy management you've been able to give it as it goes vertical. And with the 1900 motor in this thing, you should be able to get better vertical potential and do more moves like that without having to worry about stalling as much. That covers most of everything, but I've noticed in the past some people ask me, how do you specifically do this stuff? How do you get it set up? How do you do this? How do you do that? So I'll devote this last part to explaining how I've set things up in my Spektrum receiver. And we'll start with the first mix that I use, which I need to actually power the jet up real quick, so I'm going to throttle up real fast. Okay. And this is my throttle to auxiliary 7 mix. Okay. If you saw the Viper video that I put up recently the other day for maximum aerobatic performance, it's going to be very similar to this one. At low throttle input, the gain channel AX7, which is controlled by here, this little slider switch, goes up, or it stays neutral rather, and as it goes up, the AS3X stabilization system kicks in more, and then as the thrust increases, and presumably the speed does as well, the effect of AS3X goes down until you get to full thrust where it has very little to no effect at all. So at low throttle, this is what the AS3X system looks like. Okay, it's got a bit of an effect, but nothing too crazy. At roughly landing thrust, this is about normally where I keep a jet to land. I have the most effect out of the AS3X system here. You can see the rudder is displacing more, see the elevator is displacing more, and at full throttle, you can see that it has almost no effect. The rudder barely moves, and the stabs barely move as well. Now, this can be adjusted using the slider on the back of the jet, or not jet, the receiver. Ah, God, the transmitter, the back of the transmitter. The slider can increase those values completely. So let's put it in landing thrust at full AS3X stabilization. That would make it go crazy, right?
1 minute.
Now if I take the slider and put it all the way to the left, it should pretty much disable the entire system. But it doesn't because it's in landing thrust. So if I was to put it at full throttle, you would see the jet doesn't seem to have any stabilization whatsoever. So that is how I simulate a flight control computer on this jet, and on my other jets as well. It keeps the plane stable in most airspeeds. However, if you look back at some of the videos, you'll see the plane wobbling a little bit in a couple of points. That's because there's no substitute for a proper pitot tube that actually reads airspeed. So I'm just doing a very crude system where as maybe I'm coming at full speed and I throttle back and the plane's going 60 miles an hour, but it's in landing config right here, that's when it starts wobbling. That's the only issue. I could always counteract that by sliding this switch here over so that the AS3X system is minimized while I'm doing active flying if there's not a lot of wind or anything. It really doesn't have a whole lot of benefit until there's wind outside. I mean, it kind of helps keep the plane stable in some moves, but if it's not windy, there's really no reason to even have it working at its full potential. I just have it there for maidens because it was kind of a weird crosswind yesterday. Okay, so that's that. I'll show you what it looks like in forward programming as well. May have to step back from the jet so it doesn't disconnect. Okay, so we go to the gyro settings and we go to AS3X settings. You'll see under capture gyro gains, as I advance the throttle, the gains either go up or go down. So it's a pretty cool system. I'm kind of happy that I came up with it. It works really well for pretty much everything I've flown. Some jets need more AS3X stabilization, some of them need less. Hell, even on my F-16 here, one thing I didn't mention that I thought of the other day was I tricked the receiver into thinking that it's a Taileron setup when it's really a dual elevator setup, so that AS3X actually functions on the stabilators. And the reason why I did that for this jet is because when the flaps are completely out, when the AS3X system is correcting for roll, this is just moving up slightly on each side. It's barely doing anything, and you're having to fight the roll of the jet in that situation. It really sucks. So now the stabs correct for roll as well, but if you were to set the plane up as a Taileron jet in your transmitter, what ends up happening is when you go to dump flaps with a flapper on Taileron configuration, it causes the plane to the stabs start rolling. They actually move into a roll config. It's really dumb. So to get around that, you set it up as a dual elevator plane first, get everything all set up the way you want it, and then go change it to Taileron, flapper-on mix, aircraft type rather, and then you go into the receiver, tell it to relearn servo settings, and then go back and change it to dual elevator and then flapper-on. And then everything will work the way it's supposed to, but the receiver in both SAFE and AS3X will recognize that those are Tailerons, and they will adjust for roll and pitch, not just pitch. And you get the best of both worlds. But you also have to adjust your gain. So as I was saying, each jet is different. Because I made a change to this jet's control surfaces, and now these humongous stabs are being used for roll instead of just these little ailerons, I had to then reduce the amount of throttle mixing that I'm using so that they don't over control the plane and cause it to spiral and crash. There's such a thing as too much AS3X, too much stability. It just starts fighting itself, and then you can't fly it. That covers most of what I wanted to go through, but again, we'll go back to mixing to continue discussing everything else that I kind of hinted at here. So elevator to flap, switch B is my second mix on an exponential curve. And this is what causes the flaps to dump out. As you change this Expo curve, say I want to change it to, I don't know, -31. If you look at the curve versus how the flap is moving, you can have an idea of what it's doing. So it gives you the ability to set up interesting mixes. And yeah, my dog wants in. Sorry, buddy, you gotta stay outside for a few. It gives you the ability to set up interesting mixes that aren't just linear, but you can only set up exponential curves in the first 6 mixes. You can't do it in the later ones. It's a little obnoxious, you would think, for how much you spent on this radio. that you'd be able to put in all of them, but unfortunately you cannot. The same thing with the power loop flap mix. That is done in a similar fashion. It's not perfect, and in fact I would probably be better turning off Expo just so there's no weird point where the flaps kind of pop back up. As you see right there, they move up just a little bit. Putting the Expo off fixes that. So it's just a mix of elevator to flap on both of them. And you just add the point in the radio where you want it to start mixing in. You use curve mix when you want to do things like this. You use normal mixes when you just need to have like something as simple as ailerons. As they move up, the elevators move up with it. That's really all those are really used for. You don't need to do anything special like a curve mix. Although you could get something similar to the like reduced roll authority if you put this on a curve with the ailerons, so that when this aileron is moving up at 50%, this one only moves up at 10% until you get to the edge of the stick, and then suddenly it pops all the way out like this. I could demonstrate that really quick too. In fact, I might as well, just to show you kind of how the system's set up. So we'll start with the first mix just to show how it's set up. Currently it's on switch F. So switch F controls the aileron movement. But we'll go ahead and disable that for right now. So it's just aileron movement and no Tailerons. And then we'll put Tailerons on a curve mix. So for those of you guys who do like, I don't want to say more precise roll, but maybe less contribution from the Tailerons or the stabs, you can have that option, and this will show you how to do it. This should soften it up significantly. It's almost like adding Expo on top of Expo. So you would do aileron to, I believe it's left elevator. You may have to play with them depending on how advanced your setup is. Sometimes the actual channel assignment does not always correspond to the actual channel that you're trying to mix. So we'll change it to switch F, set it to 0 and 2, because sometimes I like to have switch F just be number 1 that turns everything off, but not 0 and 2 control everything else. So for this, we'll go to 50%, and then we'll add a point at -50. And then at +50, we'll add a point. And I screwed that up because it's not exactly at 50, so let's try that again. Delete the point, and then add it at 50. And screw it up one more time. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I like to get it just right so there's no discrepancy in how it feels. Okay, number 4 would need to be, let's see. Okay, there we go. So let's set number 4 to -25%. Okay, and then set number 2 to 25%. Okay, and we'll set number 1 to 100%. And then we'll set number 5 to -100%. All right. Now it's on a curve, and the ailerons are moving more than the elevators are until you get to the extent of the stick. So this allows you to get more contribution from the ailerons for roll and less from the stabs. If you want even less, you can deaden it up even more by changing it to, say, -10% and 10%. So now the ailerons are moving a whole lot, and the elevators aren't. But the problem with this is that because it's an exponential curve, if you look closely, you can see that the curve is going above the baseline and below the baseline on the other side. So we'd have to adjust this until it's, say, 15% is what we're, no, even 17% is what it would have to be. There we go. Now they have pretty much no effect in the first quarter to half of the stick. I'll show you what it looks like on the monitor. So if we look at REL and LEL versus AL, you'll see how it's working. So I'm at roughly halfway through the stick. At -50, the elevator moves 7%. At -75, the elevator moves 25. And at -120 or so, it moves 100. And that at the end of the stick, they move to their full extent. So it would allow you to still get the Taileron functionality for flat spinning if you wanted it, but it would deaden out how quick it rolls. I would never fly it like this. I really like how precise and robust the roll response is, but for those of you who want more of a deadened stick response, this would be the best way to do it. If that helps out, hopefully it does. It should give you a pretty good understanding of how it works. I'm going to go ahead and reset my mixing back to the way it was. So let's go down to aileron to left elevator and switch that back. Now on some jets, like my F-16, it's actually aileron to AX3. It's not aileron to LEL, which is weird, but again, as I said with Spektrum, sometimes in the more advanced configurations, mixing to what it seems like it's supposed to be could make the gear come out, and in some cases could even make the throttle start advancing. It's really dumb, and I'm looking forward to them fixing it. We'll go ahead and get the gear out, and I'll show you the mixing on the trimmer. Okay, that one's as simple as figuring out that I had set the receiver with the nose wheel to AX2, and that's just 100 and 100. It's very simple. The movement is just controlled 1-to-1 with the rudder, so as the rudder moves, the nose wheel moves with it. You can reduce that, but again, I don't see why you would. It's better to have all the movement when you need it rather than need it and not have it. And you can always deaden how it moves by adding Expo. When you saw me landing it in a confined area and having to get it down and get it to stop quickly, all you have to do is just move the rudder stick left and right quickly, and that gets the plane to slow down without making it flip over itself. I did this just like this. You know, obviously watching the plane, waiting for it to slow down enough to gain an intuitive feel on when to start doing that. The same with the Viper. Like if you were to immediately reverse thrust the second you hit the ground, the huge torque roll that you would get on the ground from full thrust reverse causes the plane to move full left. And even with full right rudder, it can't counteract it. But the right trimmer, again, I was actually showing the wrong thing, but the right trimmer is just -100 and -100 on mine, and as I push it up, it moves the wheel to the right, and as I push it down, it moves the wheel to the left. That's intuitive to me. You may find it better to reverse that, just depends on how you think. I just correspond pushing up with right and pushing down with left in a trim that can only go up and down and can't go left and right, like physically. I think that covers pretty much all the advanced stuff. Again, I like to use callouts, so I like to know what my frame losses are.
0 losses, 100% strength.
So we've sat here this entire time, it hasn't lost a single frame.
23.02 volts.
I have that set up to call out constantly.
0 hold.
Every 30 seconds. The holds call out when I need that, just whenever I switch to it. Sometimes I just want to know if the plane's acting weird, maybe it did go into a hold. I have mine programmed to fail-safe, in-safe, so that it tries to gently float up a little bit. I would rather have it stall and fall down rather than perpetually fly off and just decide that its people need it and it just wants to go away. That pretty much covers everything. I can't think of anything else that I need to cover with this particular jet. Again, key takeaways from this, if you want to get the most aerobatic performance, again, aerobatics not in terms of power. You want to get the plane to balance about right here. If you can get it to balance in here, so much the better. The further back you can get it, I'd say this is probably the limit, just based on testing and whatnot. I wouldn't want to go any further than this. I'm about right here, right about now. With the wheels out, the CG moves back even further. So if I was to put my fingers there, yeah, slightly nose heavy right here. So that's right here. I'd say to that set of oval panels right here, anywhere in this range is where you want to be. So I'm probably at the extreme nose-heavy side of where the plane could be in terms of aerobatic potential. If I go back even further, I bet it'll fly better. I may experiment with adding a little bit more tail weight to it. Nothing major, just maybe shifting the amount of weight that was in the nose to the tail of the jet to get it to alpha better, rotate better, that kind of stuff. Again, Tailerons are everything in military jets and jets, even like the Viper. When I have Crow out, I want to have Tailerons to continue to get roll potential that I would otherwise lose. 150% rates. I'm not going to tell you that you should fly like that. I'm just going to say that's how I do, and I haven't lost a jet to it yet. Some guys will tell you that your stabs are going to rip off. I mean, just use some common sense, right? I mean, a real jet isn't going to fly like this at 100 to like 1,000 miles an hour. It's not going to do that. You're not going to have full deflection at that time. So like, just use Expo and a bit of common sense and realize that, you know, you move your stick just enough. You see how the jet's performing. You can get a feel for it in the air. You can tell that it's moving in a turn the way you want it to. If you go any further, it might, you know, accelerate, stall. Maybe just don't do this when you're trying to go through turns and you should be fine. I really doubt you're going to rip the stabs off of this plane. It's all plastic reinforced with metal on metal hinges with ball bearings and a steel joiner rod in the back for the whole thing. If that comes out, I think the plane's got more structural problems that you would have probably seen beforehand. In the F-22, I must have done 70 some odd Cobra maneuvers in it, and that plane's built as well as this one is. And I never saw a single sign of stress on it. It handled it perfectly. Hopefully you guys find this helpful. As always, just leave questions or comments in the comment section, and I'll do whatever I can to help you out. Thanks for watching.